They want to.
Tighten it up. Tighten your group shot in.
Thank you, everyone. My name is Adam Piper. I'm the Executive Director of the Republican Attorneys General Association. Behind me today are some of our finest attorneys general. They will be joining Attorney General Pam Bondi, a former chair of the Republican Attorneys General Association, now our nation's Attorney General, along with President Trump at Main Justice in a couple hours. I will kick off with Attorney General Marshall, one of our other previous chairs, who will talk about what he is doing to work with the Trump administration to keep America safe and make America safe again. General Marshall.
Again, good morning. It is a pleasure to be able to join our dear friend, Attorney General Pam Bondi, today, along with President Trump, to have a very transparent and candid discussion about crime in our country and what this administration and their partnership with state AGs are going to do to make our community safer. We simply need to look back to the first Trump administration to know the value of the cooperation of both federal and state law enforcement and the difference it makes. I've been a prosecutor now for almost 30 years. And never in my lifetime as a prosecutor did I see the collaborative and cooperative efforts between federal and state law enforcement to deal with gun crimes on our streets. We made significant gains. We were able to take violent felons off our streets. And sadly, the new administration did not share that emphasis or that effort. Seemingly, our federal law enforcement was more concerned about parents at school board meetings or churches than they were in addressing the growing violent crime problem across our country. I know President Trump is going to speak very candidly and strongly today about what's next, and one of the things that I appreciate is that we're already seeing tangible differences on the border with regard to fentanyl that's crossing our points of entry. I know that because fentanyl is more expensive in Alabama now, which means that we're doing a better job of stopping the cartel and its supply coming across the country. But there is still significant work to be done. I've appreciated General Miyares and his references to the fentanyl issue and it being a national security issue, because one of the things that we're seeing is synthetic fentanyl that is laced with xylazine. The problem with that combination is that Narcan and naloxone, which have been so critical in being able to save lives, any analog that contains that particular chemical is resistant to the use of those reversal agents. We will continue to see if China is able to import this chemical into our country and provide it to the cartel, an increase in the loss of life across our country as a result of this particular problem, and I look forward to the administration being able to work with us on this effort. I can tell you it is remarkably refreshing to have an Attorney General who in her confirmation hearing and since the time she's taken office has placed an emphasis on violent crime. As a result of that priority, the people in Alabama will be safer and look forward to being able to work with the administration. This time, I'd like to introduce our newest member from the great state of Florida.
Thank you. It's great to be here today. I'll echo that the collaboration that we as a state of Florida are having with our federal partners right now is like nothing I've ever seen before. Joe Biden and the Democrats put our families and our kids in danger. The open border, the opportunity for our enemies to pump fentanyl in and put our kids at risk, it was nothing like it. That's changed. In Florida, we're proud to announce we've had a 50-year crime low. We're the first state in the country that's had all of our statewide law enforcement and sheriffs get certified to partner with ICE in the 287G program and have deputized authorities to detain our criminal aliens and get them back where we came from. And in the short time since President Trump took the oath, we've had dozens of raids and we've already detained dozens of criminal aliens. Most of these individuals we find went in and out of the criminal justice system numerous times, and the federal government under the Biden administration let them go free. That stops now. We're excited to work with the Floridian Attorney General Bondi. We're continuing to recruit law enforcement from leftist blue states where they're defunding the police. We are increasing pay. We are backing our law enforcement, and we are excited to provide bonuses to those officers around the country. They've got a home here, and they're going to continue to reinforce our great law enforcement presence. So we're going to keep Florida safe, strong, and free, and we're going to look forward to working with the Trump administration and Attorney General Bondi to crack down on illegal immigration once and for all. So with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague from Pennsylvania, Attorney General Sunday.
Good morning. I'm Dave Sunday, the Attorney General from Pennsylvania, and I'm going to take a minute to talk about fentanyl and its impact on our communities. So I'm a career prosecutor, and I was a district attorney in York County, Pennsylvania. And I can tell you right now that there is no pain, rarely have I seen pain, like I've seen when I spoke with parents who have slowly watched their children drift away into addiction. To talk to parents and hear about the pain and suffering that they've had for years and years, only to ultimately, in a lot of cases, take to a place where their children die from overdoses. It is unbelievably devastating. It has decimated families all throughout this country, in particular in Pennsylvania. It has torn families apart. It's impacted our economy. It's impacted public safety. It's, like I said, taken families to shreds, and it's something that's got to stop. What I can tell you right now, again as a prosecutor, is that we have to do everything in our power to keep our communities safe. If our communities aren't safe, literally nothing else matters. And if we cannot have public safety, how can we expect to have a thriving economy and a thriving world where our children can grow up and be safe? I can tell you again, with the finite resources that we had on the local level, there is no way that anyone can do this by themselves. It's not a real thing. You cannot achieve maximum public safety and keep families safe if you're by yourself. And right now, I can tell you with the Trump administration and with Attorney General Pam Bondi, we are in a place now where we are all working together, where resources are coming together, where people are collaborating at all levels of government, from local government to state government to working with our federal partners. Because when you all work together, that's when magic happens. I cannot tell you how excited I am as an Attorney General to have partners that have that same vision and that same mission so that we can work together literally every single day to decrease the amount of fentanyl coming into our communities and killing our children. It's an absolute honor to be here with all of my colleagues that I know are working so unbelievably hard with these same issues. And again, together we can achieve anything. Thank you. And I'm going to introduce next my colleague, Alan Wilson.
Thank you all. I'm Alan Wilson. I'm the Attorney General for the great state of South Carolina, and it's great to be up here with the men, just men right now. We have some women now, but I've been working with to keep our state safe. I had the opportunity to actually serve for 8 years with our current United States Attorney General Pam Bondi. She and I came into office at the same time, and I got to work with her for 8 years, and I'm incredibly excited to see the role that she is filling out right now, and that what she's doing at the Justice Department is going to be so incredibly helpful to all of us. When people ask me what keeps me up at night, I have to talk about a lot of the things originating at the southern border of the United States. Obviously, a lot of the gang activity, the illegal immigration activity, and of course, probably most importantly, the fentanyl that is being trafficked into our respective states. Last summer, I had the opportunity to go to the southern border with my colleague, Attorney General Chris Carr from Georgia, and Attorney General Jason Miyares from the Commonwealth of Virginia, who's right here to my right. And while down there, we were learning that the border was so porous and the incentive structure at that time was so great that illegal aliens would actually run into the arms of ICE or Border Patrol agents, and they would run away from state officers because they knew that one officer would release them into the interior of the United States, and the state officer would drop them on the other side of the border. And this incentive structure was basically pipelining in lots of illegal fentanyl and other illicit narcotics being piped in by Mexican drug cartels with the support and funding of the Chinese government. I learned at that time that there was an increasing number of Tren de Agua, TDA gang members. You've heard of MS-13, we now heard of Tren de Agua. They were starting to cross the southern border. At that time, there were no TDA gang members in the state of South Carolina. I was on a ride-along a few weeks ago with a low-country law enforcement official who was telling me that they now have TDA gangs in the state of South Carolina. They are now popping up, and they're peddling this poison on the streets. This is important because 2 months ago, or roughly 2 months ago, America plugged the holes in the boat, but the water is still in the boat. A lot of the leftover from the policies of the previous administration, a lot of these symptoms, a lot of the consequences of those policies that were implemented have created a lot of problems for our state. We have increased amounts of drug trafficking coming into our states. We have potentially increase human trafficking. Obviously, they can't locate 300,000 unaccompanied minors, and we know that fentanyl is being piped in. Last January, I had one drug case where we arrested 64 defendants and charged them with over 300 charges. We confiscated 1.5 kilos of methamphetamine and 1 kilo of fentanyl in just one drug sting. 1 kilo of fentanyl, according to the Drug Enforcement Administration, is enough to kill 500,000 people. 10% of the state of South Carolina could have been killed with the drugs that we recovered in that one operation. So one of the things that we've been doing in South Carolina is, last week I was with all of our sheriffs at their annual winter conference, and something that I hadn't seen in several years is we had the head of the Homeland Security Investigations and we had the head of ICE for the state of South Carolina attend the sheriff's conference. I had this special counselor to Secretary Noem from Homeland Security was there to present on the 287G program. In South Carolina, we have 46 sheriffs, and historically we only have 3 sheriffs that are part of this 287G program. The 287G program is a program that allows federal agents to deputize local law enforcement to carry out the functions of federal immigration officers under the watchful eye of federal immigration officials, but allows us to force multiply and create a larger bandwidth of law enforcement officials who are able to, when they intersect and interdict, when they pull someone over who's got 4 people in the car, and you got one person who's driving maybe under the influence, and you have 3 people in the back who are unlawfully in the United States or possibly TDA gang members or MS-13 gang members. Those local law enforcement can now take into custody and help remove those individuals from our respective states and hand them over to ICE. This partnership is something that I've been told had been gutted. It had been made unworkable, unmanageable, and it was something that no sheriffs were even considering joining over the last 4 or 5 years because it was an unworkable partnership. Since the Trump administration's come in, Homeland Security and ICE have gutted that program. They've completely rehabilitated and reformed it and made it easier. I am told by ICE officials in South Carolina that sheriffs in South Carolina since that meeting have been lining up to join the 287G program so they can go after those peddling fentanyl and other kinds of poison on the streets of South Carolina. They can go after these violent gang members and support our federal officials who now have made securing the borders and protecting Americans a priority. Now South Carolina can get behind the Trump administration and helping not only secure our borders in South Carolina, but the borders around the country. Again, I want to thank you all for covering this. What we're talking about today is so important, protecting people. There's no more important mission that the government has than protecting its citizenry. I'm honored that I will be followed as the Attorney General for the state of South Carolina. I get to introduce the other Southern Attorney General here, the Attorney General from the great state of South Dakota, Marty Jackley.
Good morning. Marty Jackley, Attorney General for South Dakota and former United States Attorney. I want to start with thanking President Trump and our dear friend General Bondi for not just their leadership, but the partnership with state attorney generals and local authorities to make America safe again. When you look at South Dakota, a Midwestern state in the heartland of America, last year alone we confiscated 18.2 pounds of fentanyl, enough to kill our population 4 to 5 times. That's how important these partnerships are. When you look at what General Bondi is doing right now, from high-intensity drug trafficking task forces to internet crimes against children and fighting human trafficking, these are essential partnerships that are working across the United States and working in South Dakota. I've been blessed in South Dakota with a very strong public safety-minded legislature. From strengthening our laws on fentanyl distribution to fighting human trafficking, they've given us in law enforcement the tools to address and make our communities safer, which is why these partnerships are so significant and so important for us to be able to get the laws enforced to protect our communities. On behalf of our sheriffs, our chiefs, our line prosecutors, I again want to thank the President and our Attorney General Pam Bondi for forming these partnerships to help us make things safer across the nation and here in South Dakota. I too get the privilege of introducing a close friend of mine, the Virginia Attorney General, Jason Miyares.
As my friend General Wilson noted, several of us went to the border last year, and to give you kind of a sense of both what we saw and just the numbers, during the Biden administration, there were over 8.2 million illegal crossings into the United States. That's larger than the population of 32 U.S. states. Enough fentanyl crossing our southern border to kill every man, woman, and child in the United States 3 times over. During the peak years in the Biden administration, 105,000 Americans were dying every year from addiction overdose. And you hear those numbers, and it's easy just to kind of hard to a little bit to quantify it. To put things in perspective, we were losing 55,000 Americans. We lost 55,000 Americans in the Vietnam War over the course of 15 years, plus years. So it was the equivalent of 2 Vietnam Wars every 12 months. Now, when I was, when our dear friend General Moody, who's now Senator Moody, and the individuals that were in office at the time, they all joined a joint letter to the Biden administration begging them, not just to get some control over the border, but to declare the cartels a foreign terrorist organization. Because the Sinaloa cartel, in my personal opinion, is the most dangerous criminal enterprise on the planet, I would argue probably in the history of the world. They have decided to conduct chemical warfare on our children. They have created an unholy alliance with the Communist Party of China, and they have now taken away so many of our children and our community, and every Attorney General behind me has had those horrific conversations. As one of my colleagues noted, there is no cry as horrific as the cry of a mother that has lost her child. We've heard it. We begged the administration, the Biden administration, to do something. I would argue they did next to nothing. So I cannot tell you how refreshing it is to see in the first 30 days, I've received more phone calls from the Department of Justice on how we can collaborate and work together the first 30 days under General Bondi than I did in my previous 3 years as Attorney General. Within their first 30 days, something we begged them to do and they refused to, they declared the cartels a foreign terrorist organization. Because we know once you take things seriously and you actually want to both close our border and go after these dealers, you see results. In Virginia, when Governor Youngkin and I took office, murder rate was at a 20-year high. Addiction rate was at a 3-4 decade high. The latest numbers is our addiction rates have dropped 40% from our 2021 high. Second lowest drop in the entire country. Our murder rates now dropped by a third. What did we do? Intervention, prevention, and yes, prosecution. You have to go after these repeat offenders. You have to go after these dealers. You got to get them off their streets. And so we've seen those results because we know that it works. And so I can't tell you what a night and day difference we've seen with this Justice Department taking these transnational gangs seriously, taking the scourge of fentanyl seriously, going after the cartels. We know the results are going to be different. And so I want to say thank you, and we look forward to working with them to keep our streets safe. And now I get to introduce a fellow Virginian from a different state, but my colleague and friend from the great Attorney General of West Virginia, J.B. McCleskey.
Good morning, everybody. So we've heard my colleagues talk a lot about the supply side of the opioid crisis. And when you're from West Virginia, we've been the epicenter of the opioid and fentanyl crisis for the last 30 years. And the destruction that it's left on our people and our economy is palatable. We have more than 7,000 children in foster care because they were born to families who were struggling with drug addiction. We have historic rates of job loss in southern West Virginia. And so I am so excited to see the border get closed and to see these criminal gangs get treated the way that they should be by the Justice Department, and that means either deported or put into jail. But what I'm the most excited about in working with this Justice Department and President Trump is that they understand the demand side as well. And in West Virginia, there's a hopelessness in so many of our communities that have been forgotten by the federal government, a federal government that said that energy jobs don't matter, that coal jobs don't matter, that gas jobs don't matter, that rural people don't matter. If you live in flyover country, your job and your economy is irrelevant. President Trump and this administration, if you look from the EPA to the Department of Energy to the Department of Education to the Department of Veterans Affairs, is doing so much to raise the hopes and the likelihood of success of not just West Virginia's addicts, people that are trying to get better and trying to find a great job in the place that they live, but the children of West Virginia are seeing that there are people in this country who believe in West Virginia. They believe in the things that we can do, and they believe that tomorrow is going to be better than today. And the only way we're ever going to truly stop this fentanyl and opioid crisis in this country is to, one, put all the bad guys in jail, and we're asking the Senate to please pass the Halt Fentanyl Act as soon as they possibly can. It's enormously important, not just to West Virginia, but the country, but to also give hope to so many people that live in communities that have been forgotten. And these communities are the very communities that voted overwhelmingly for President Trump. And the reason they did so is because they know that they're seen by him, they know that they're understood by him, and they know that his administration is doing everything they can to give the children a chance at a great life and to give their parents a chance who might be addicted at getting off of drugs and finding a life outside of addiction that is meaningful to them as well. So it is my great pleasure to introduce Rob Duncan, the Chief Deputy Attorney General from the great Commonwealth of Kentucky, excuse me. They get very mad when we get that wrong. But Rob, thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Rob Duncan. I'm the Deputy Attorney General for the Commonwealth of Kentucky. I'm here on behalf of Attorney General Russell Coleman, who sent his regrets, but for a family commitment, he would have been here with you today. As a former federal prosecutor and now the Deputy AG for Kentucky, I have seen firsthand the devastating impact that fentanyl and fentanyl analogs have caused on the Commonwealth. The death and destruction from just one pill is unimaginable. And as Attorney General McCuskey said, we urge the Senate to pass the Halt Fentanyl Act to give law enforcement additional tools by scheduling fentanyl analogs as Schedule I drugs. It allows law enforcement and prosecutors to hold the traffickers of this poison accountable. As my colleagues have indicated, I would also like to, have already indicated, the great collaboration and partnership among the state AGs and this administration, the leadership of President Trump, the leadership of President Bondi, has led to this increased emphasis and renewed focus on law enforcement and protecting the public that we all share in our respective offices in our states. So I'd like to thank you all for this opportunity today. I'll turn it back over now to Adam Piper.
Thank you, Rob and generals. We're on a little bit of a tight schedule, but can take one or two questions if there is one from the audience.
I wanted to ask you about another area that the Trump administration has expressed desire to collaborate with state attorney generals on. In President Trump's executive order on child mutilation, he said that the DOJ will be partnering with state attorneys general. Do you have plans to look into hospitals that are providing these procedures for children, or what will collaboration on this issue look like?
First off, I'll speak for South Carolina. I think my colleagues can speak for their states. You know, in South Carolina, we passed a Help Not Harm bill. This is something that I am defending in court right now. I think each of us in our respective states can defend the laws that our state legislatures pass. I also intend to defend President Trump's executive order. Obviously, we were up here for the Scammetti case. I know General Marshall's been a leader in this area as well, but in South Carolina, overwhelming majorities of people support laws on the books that protect children from those mutilations. And basically, when you're injecting hormones that chemically change a person at the age of 12 for the rest of their life, or you mutilate their genitals and you change who they are for the rest of their life, these are irreversible decisions. And the states have a right to pass laws that protect them from that harm. And I think as a state attorney general, we are duty bound to defend those laws and to defend the rights of our citizens to be protected from that type of wacko science.
We have about 3 minutes before the AGs have to go through security at Main Justice.
Thank you. Meryl Cornfield from the Washington Post. I was hoping that you could talk about what you are hoping to get out of your meeting with Trump, President Trump and AG Bondi. Like specifically, if you, have any resources that you would like to see them provide, as you talked about the drug issues in your states, and also like what you would like to see, as there is this massive effort of government cuts right now. Not cut, like resources that go to states. For instance, Republican lawmakers, some of them have been talking about cutting AFT, if that's something, as you talked about firearms, like you would have thoughts on. If you could talk about just like federal resources you don't want to lose or want to gain.
Great question. Marty Jackley, South Dakota Attorney General. I'll talk about a couple areas that are very important to us, at least in South Dakota. High-intensity drug trafficking task force. It's something that's already a partnership between federal authorities, state and local authorities. That funding is essential. It's very important to us. We have both investigators and prosecutors as a part of that. I actually cross-deputize the Assistant U.S. Attorney on that, so that's an important area. The ICAC, Internet Crimes Against Children Task Force, oftentimes in smaller states, will go beyond just the internet crimes. We'll deal with human trafficking. I talked a little bit about how our state passed the Attorney General's package on strengthening human trafficking laws, so we'll need some additional resources on that. So that's, again, kind of one of those areas that I see this partnership, additional people and resources and technology would be very helpful in protecting the public.
I mean, I would say here, particularly in the capital region, the Joint Task Force on these transnational gangs, I think is going to be critical. HIDA as well. I would say I would love to see additional partnership with what we've done in Virginia, Operation Ceasefire, which we launched. We cross-designated assistant attorney generals in my office with the U.S. Attorney's Office in our 13 most violent cities in Virginia. We've had a 66% reduction in our murder rate in our targeted cities, because when you go after repeat violent offenders, you lower crime. Depending on the study, but on average, roughly 5% of felons are committing over 50% of the violent felonies. You want to lower violent crime, you want to lower gun violence, go after those repeat violent offenders. That's what we've done in Operation Ceasefire in our ceasefire cities. We would personally love to get the resource of the federal government to expand that and give it more prosecutors going after these repeat offenders.
Real quick, I want to reiterate the 287G program is a partnership that is invaluable to local law enforcement. I talked about it in my initial statement, so I won't repeat myself. Another area that I want to say is we talk about going after the bad guys and the partnerships we have with the Trump administration or any administration at the federal level, but I don't want to overlook the victims. Over the last several years, I don't know if my colleagues can speak to this, but the VOCA funding has really kind of dried up. And once victim services providers that either work for local law enforcement or prosecution agencies or state agencies or nonprofit groups who provide victim services, think of your children advocacy centers. Once that funding dries up, and a lot of these folks rely on some of the grant funding, once that dries up and once they shutter their doors, that service goes away forever and it's likely to never come back. So maintaining the funding for Victims of Crime Act grant money is something that is very important to me in South Carolina, and I'm sure my colleagues would probably concur with that.
Thank you, everyone. The AGs have to get through security and main justice. They keep moving the time up. But thank you so much for your coverage. Thanks for helping us fight fentanyl across the country.